I'll frame it this way, which is our perspective on the signal related to marketing measurement that we can have the highest confidence in is the result of a GeoLift, Holdout incrementality test set up at a point in time that we get a stat sig result from that is 90% confidence or greater. Hard stop. That is what we are going to believe in and orient our decision making around as it relates to budget allocation, target setting, and then the optimization of the media campaigns that flow from the budget allocation and targets. But
this episode of the Ecommerce Playbook podcast is brought to you by Aaliyah, the best pop-up tool in D2C. At Aaliyah, all they do is pop-ups. It's all they care about. It's what they live and breathe. Nike Strength, Plunge, Create Gummies, Patrick Taub, Brez, and Hostage Tape are some of the 900 plus brands using Aaliyah. They focus on robust analytics, real A/B testing that delivers meaningful insights, lightning fast load times, and an impressive range of customization options. What truly sets Aaliyah apart, though, is the support team. They're incredibly responsive, genuinely helpful, and will build your pop-ups for you. If you book a demo with them and mention our podcast on the demo, they'll do 30 days free and 20% off. Find them at AliaLearn.com. That's ALIA Learn.com. This episode of the e-commerce playbook is brought to you by TaxCloud. Sales tax is overwhelming. Never mind the stress that comes with a provider that's overpriced, unreliable, or leaves you waiting days to get a reply. TaxCloud is here to tell you that there's a better way. They're not just a tool, they're a trusted filing partner for growing Shopify brands. They'll work directly with the states on your behalf to handle registrations, filings, and ongoing compliance so you can stay focused on growing your business. Go ahead and check them out at taxcloud.com/thread. Listeners get free migration onboarding services when you decide to make the switch. That's taxcloud.com/thread. Hey folks, welcome to the e-commerce playbook podcast. I'm your host, Richard Gaffin, Director of Digital Product Strategy here at Common Thread Collective. And I'm joined this week in a sort of semi-regular segment called War Reporter Luke. We're joined by our VP of e-commerce strategy, Luke Austin, recently back from paternity leave, I believe. Luke, what's going on, man?
Oh, we were in the throes. It got an 18-month-old and a 5-week-old, and it's a party. But
there you go.
We're doing good. Yeah, and sort of reflecting on it, the first time around, there's just so many novel things to solve through, and with the second, we expected the chaos and inconsistency a lot more, and so it's making for a much. It's just been where my wife and I are sort of able to take it in stride and just kind of laugh. There's more humor in the situation than prior. So we're in it. Some good nights, some bad, but we're just rolling with it.
There you go. Well, and boy, does that sound like a metaphor for e-commerce, understanding how to survive through the chaos. So obviously that's what we're here to talk about today. Occasionally we'll have Luke on to kind of give us a sense of like what the actual workflow looks like on the front lines, so to speak, of working with some of our D2C clients in the D2C industry in general. So a couple things to talk about. So before we kind of hit record here, you laid out for us a couple of sort of core problems that a lot of D2C brands are facing, both in our agency and then in kind of their in-house teams for some of our clients. So let's talk a little bit about the first of two issues, which is that no one seems to know what to believe or what to trust in terms of measurement, in terms of target setting. So let's break that down a little bit.
Yeah. This has been a constant challenge that we have tried to stand in the gap and bring clarity in for a while now, which is getting clarity on what signal to believe. What is the strongest signal from an infinite number of signals that we can all have on channel performance and measurement and targets? What is the signal that we should prioritize above all others? And at what point do we say, we believe in this, we are subscribing to this signal, and we are going to orient our workflow against it? Because in the absence of that, which this is what's happening in most cases across most brands and the workflows that exist that we see, is some level of unbelief or misalignment in terms of that question. What is the target? What is the right thing to believe, and what should we act on? And what it leads to is typically, okay, we're going to orient around this signal, this measurement signal, as a source of truth. Let's make a bunch of actions against it. Let's go like really far to one side, right? Like we are seeing our revenue is decreasing. And so we're going to look at the most conservative GA last click revenue and try to drive GA last click revenue, orient around that. After say a week or two, start to see that our new customer revenue or percent new to file metric starts to not look so great because GA last click naturally favors sort of bottom of funnel, returning customer channels and tactics. So, oh wait, percent new to file, new customer revenue, let's go after those. So we're going to drive that up. So all of a sudden now we have some awareness or reach campaigns going in Meta, which is increasing our percent new to file, but all of a sudden now our AMER and our contribution margin are starting to take a hit. And it's just this cycle of one signal after the other that leads to inconsistent decision making at different intervals, misalignment between the team. And what we would say is the biggest problem of it all is energy and resources and twiddling being focused on the wrong set of things, on the lowest activity impact, which is making tweaks in the Meta ad account, adjusting your bids and budgets. And that's sort of like the end output of this, which is the hyper orientation around, okay, we're going to adjust this bid today, adjust this budget today, sort of like surfing the media campaign strategy rather than focus on a much higher impact. So the belief is at the core of this, which is what are we going to believe is the strongest signal that we're going to base our decisions against? And that is the thing that we are fighting for and are really orienting around. Is the first step in this is alignment of belief, because all the decisions in the workflow then are an output and outflow of that belief or lack of belief.
Okay, so it sounds like there's kind of like what I'm hearing is that there's two issues happening here. One is that there's a problem when you mentioned a problem with trust or belief. It's like sort of a problem perhaps with, let's say, data fidelity. Like, do we understand, like, is this tool reporting in a way that's meaningful to us? And then the second problem is a lack of understanding around what metric within our hierarchy of metrics, as I spoke with Taylor about last week, which one of those metrics is actually the most important thing to go after. So let's talk about the first part then. And that kind of segues maybe into another question I have, which is what is unique about this moment? Because this sounds like this could have been a sort of an issue with e-commerce since the beginning of time, or the beginning of whenever e-commerce started. So let's double back then and answer my question around what's the current set of issues with data fidelity and trusting the measurement tools?
Yeah. So at this point, it's not a unique thing. It's the same thing that's been going on for forever, since the beginning.
Yeah.
But what's wild is that like there's more tools available than ever, but the same sort of like the same question against the output is happening. So it's the same thing, but it's just perpetuating it, and it's not different, even though we have other signals available to us. And so I'll frame it this way, which is our perspective on the signal related to marketing measurement that we can have the highest confidence in is the result of a GeoLift, Holdout incrementality test set up at a point in time that we get a stat sig result from that is 90% confidence or greater. Hard stop. That is what we are going to believe in and orient our decision making around as it relates to budget allocation, target setting, and then the optimization of the media campaigns that flow from the budget allocation and targets. But what we are subscribing to is geo holdout test from an incrementality study. Once we reach 90% confidence or better from that test, we are going to use that as the best signal of what to believe in terms of the channel of contribution, and we are going to act against that. We are not going to subscribe to something else in its place. In the meantime, we're not going to replace that. But once we have that signal, that is the thing that's going to drive the decision making, to the extent that we set the target in alignment with the result of that test. And once we do, we are driving budget against it and making allocation decisions. And we're not saying, well, we're not sure, maybe we should look at a different signal, maybe we should pull in a different data source, et cetera. But that is the point in which we all align and subscribe to. This is the signal. We are going to look at performance and make decisions in alignment with this signal.
This episode of the E-commerce Playbook podcast is brought to you by Aaliyah, the best pop-up tool in D2C. At Aaliyah, all they do is pop-ups. It's all they care about. It's what they live and breathe. Nike Strength, Plunge, Create Gummies, Patrick Ta, Brez, and Hostage Tape are some of the 900 plus brands using Aaliyah. They focus on robust analytics, real A/B testing that delivers meaningful insights, lightning fast load times, and an impressive range of customization options. What truly sets Aaliyah apart, though, is the support team. They're incredibly responsive, genuinely helpful, and will build your pop-ups for you. If you book a demo with them and mention our podcast on the demo, they'll do 30 days free and 20% off. Find them at alialearn.com. That's ALIA learn.com. You don't have to navigate sales tax alone. TaxCloud is the sales partner that does things differently to give you real support from real people because you deserve peace of mind when it comes to your sales tax compliance. And you can get free migration onboarding services when you make the switch. Just go and check them out at taxcloud.com/thread. That's taxcloud.com/thread. So what leads then to the lack of faith, I guess, in that signal? Or is it just like a lack of people maybe aren't being exposed to it? Or like what's the issue there?
So I think everyone has experiences related to conversations and results from different marketing measurements that are always sort of at the back of our minds, that are, we've seen signals from other studies for other brands that conflict. So that would be one bucket where we get an incrementality result for one brand. Let's use a very specific example now, because I think it'll be helpful to illustrate this point, and it connects to the second point, which is we get a result from a Google brand incrementality geo holdout test for a brand that we work with, and the result is 73% incrementality to the platform reported ROAS. So Google brand, 73% incrementality factor, which means if the on-platform reported ROAS for Google brand is, let's call it a 6.5 as an example, 73% incrementality factor against that is, it's a 4.745 ROAS from that test. What we know is we have benchmarks for incrementality based on our data set average, and Google brand tends to be closer to 30% incremental. So less than half as incremental as the read for this specific test. That's tough when you've operated and seen many other tests that are closer to a 30% incrementality range and use that as a benchmark. And then you get a test result back that's saying for this brand, it's 73%. That's going to sit a certain way with most people. And there's going to be varying levels of sort of questioning and disbelief against it, which is challenging after, a long time that you've maybe subscribed to a different measurement metric. What it's going to also require, so the second bucket that I think leads to this lack of faith or unbelief, is when you take that a step further and you say, okay, we're going to subscribe to a 4.75 ROAS as the target for this channel based on that read, and you set your targets accordingly. What that means is you're going to probably spend more into Google brand than you previously were. Let's say you were assuming a 30% incrementality factor. Now you can actually go lower. You can push more volume into Google brand, realize more from there. And let's say you have 3 days of performance where your revenue or your contribution margin is lower than you expect, or your AMER is a little soft, right? That is a signal. One, yes, we should be looking at the revenue, the contribution margin. Those are the business metrics. That supersedes incrementality. But looking at that on a 3-day window, and then from that drawing a conclusion that this test result is probably not to be trusted or nullified as a result, that's where it breaks down as well, which is looking every day at the performance in these small windows, and then sort of even subconsciously, well, we pushed more into Google brand as a result of this test. And this 2 to 3 day window, there was softness in the AMER relative to what we expected. So based on that, and also I've seen other tests that are closer to 30% instead of 73%. I'm not sure how much to believe that. Maybe we should, run a different test or reconsider, or let's just raise the ROAS target closer to what it was historically. So I think those are the two things that tend to be at some level present for all of us when we get a test result back. That's then we have to make a choice at that point in time. Are we going to believe the thing or not? And then the action or lack of action flows out from that.
Yeah. So, I mean, it sounds like part of it is the pressure to make daily changes or to sort of prove on a day-to-day basis that you are doing something. I think we've talked about that on the pod before, but that certainly leads to second guessing decisions that would be better left to sort of simmer for another 7 days or something like that.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. Because there are so many other factors that could be at play in that small of a time window
Yeah.
that drawing the conclusion from that small of a time window is not sound thinking. That is not an
Mhm.
experiment design, right? We just ran an experiment design. We just got 90% confidence back from it. That is something you can actually subscribe to. The other is anecdotal related to a much shorter period of time. And then if you take it one level deeper from the business metrics, you go into the platform, Meta or Google, and you update your targets and budgets, your ROAS targets and your budgets according to that. Looking at the performance of those campaigns in a shorter time window than 7 days, and in some cases, when you're optimized for 7-day click, I think that there's an argument to look in a longer time window, but let's just keep it 7 days
Mhm.
minimum. This is then where we're drawing the next line here in terms of our workflow and what we're actually going to act against, which is looking at the performance outside of the 7-day window is going to give you a read that you can't have confidence in either and shouldn't be making decisions against, because you're optimizing that campaign against the 7-day window. We've all seen the chart of how cost caps work, right? Which is like over a 7-day window, you have some conversions above your target, some below, and it sort of averages out over that time period. There's day a week effect, there's seasonality, there's how the bidding mechanism in the auction works, where that sort of a time window then leads to the actions that are going to result in much less impactful work than can be done otherwise.
Yeah. Okay. So you kind of hinted at it already a little bit here, but so if the two kind of fundamental problems are not knowing what to believe in terms of measurement tools or trusting a data source, and then that leading to no cohesive or to a non-cohesive workflow, let's talk about what it looks like then or what the ideal workflow looks like. What does it look like
Yep.
for the workflow to come together?
So step one, in terms of determining budget allocation and targets, incrementality geo holdout testing is the thing that we're all going to subscribe to. There has
Mhm.
to be agreement at the highest level in the org that this is what we are going to look at to make those decisions.
Mhm.
Once that is completed, then what we're going to do is use the best starting point for incrementality and geo holdout that we know at that point in time, which is our data set of benchmarks that we have across a number of brands. Use that as a starting point. It's a better signal than what the platform is reporting. It is not going to be the best signal until we run an experiment for the brand specifically, but it is better than anything we have at the moment. So we're going to use incrementality benchmarks to set the result. Simultaneously, we're going to start setting up geo holdout tests for each of our channel tactics, right? And as we get those results, we're going to update the incrementality starting point factors so that those are the best read for the brand specifically. I'll pause here too in this step, which is I think there's another underlying thing that leads to some of the skepticism and unbelief, which is related to the confidence level of geo holdout test. Even more specifically,
Hmm.
we're looking for 90% confidence or better in our tests. There are a number of tests that we extend for longer than we expected to run them to make sure we get to 90%. And some tests that we scrap completely because the read was not strong enough for us to have confidence in making a budget allocation or target setting decision against. I would implore everyone out there that is what they should be expecting from this sort of from an incrementality and geo holdout testing. There are platform solutions out there that having that say 80% confidence is an acceptable range of the test results.
Mhm.
There's too much variation when you go less than 90% confidence on the test results, because you start to introduce a wide range of possibilities in terms of what the test result could have been. You
Mhm.
need that to be tight enough to have confidence in. Otherwise, you're going to get a test result back. Maybe it's 80% confidence, whatever, and you probably should have some skepticism of if that's going to change in time. But make sure the confidence level is high enough and that we're not just running the test and saying the result is okay, that's going to be good enough, because already right there we've introduced some sort of sense of unbelief or disbelief, or the right sort of question that
Mhm.
result at some point in time. So incrementality starting points, run geo holdout tests to update your factors. Then from there, you set your ROAS targets accordingly for each of your channels. So you have what your AMR target or first order profitability target is. We've talked about what you're expecting in terms of the return rate on each of your channels, but you have that set, and then you set your ROAS targets for each of your channels in accordance with that by applying the incrementality factor. So we have the incrementality factor from these tests. We apply the ROAS targets for each of the channels, and then from there we are going to set the targets within each of the campaigns. So our min ROAS targets in Meta, our T ROAS targets in Google. We're going to set those targets in alignment with what that target is based on the incrementality test. We're going to put an inflated budget on it to make sure it doesn't cap out. And we're not going to make decisions on a daily basis related to bid and budget changes, particularly for campaigns that are optimized for a 7-day click window or longer. We're going to set the ROAS target in alignment with what that goal is. And then we're going to make sure it has enough budget so it doesn't cap out, so that it can spend against it. And that is not typically what we see happening in most accounts. It is looking at yesterday's data or the past few days' data. Oh, the target was set at 2.6, but the campaign's been at 2.4. I'm going to tighten up a bit, or I'm going to drop the budget. Then you have a couple strong days, and it is wild. We have started to aggregate data across our accounts of the amount of bid and budget changes across each of the accounts. And it is incredible the amount of activity that's happening in pursuit of something that is not achievable. It's not a game that's worth playing or that we're going to be able to win, which is making all these individual budget changes on single days and expecting a better outcome as a result. So incrementality starting point factors, update with actual results, set the campaign ROAS targets in alignment with those, have inflated budget, and then do not make bid budget changes outside of the optimization window of those campaigns. Instead, focus the activity on something that's going to be much more impactful to the business overall.
Okay, well, that's a great segue. Let's talk about that. So if the kind of correct use of effort is not bid changes on a daily basis or even on a weekly basis, or maybe only on a weekly basis, then what's the sort of daily effort need to go into?
There are different buckets of activities related to where folks sit within the organization that the activity should be spent on. But I'll put this in the bucket of like the folks that typically would be spending a good chunk of time each day looking at bid budget changes, making adjustments in the ad accounts, making all these tweaks, like that group of folks. So the people that were normally doing this, what do you replace the activity with that's going to be higher impact, right? So focusing on that subset of folks. The thing that subset of folks is going to have the most impact on is creative output and volume in alignment with the highest performing offers, angles, and audiences within the ad account. They're the closest to the ad accounts, close to see what's working. They should know what's on the marketing calendar, and they should know what the opportunities are to drive more performance. So what we started doing at CTC, we launched a pilot program recently for this for a subset of customers, where we've actually just started making ads for these customers and sharing those ads after we brief them, design them, ideate based on top performing current ads, etc. We'll create the ads, drop them to our customers and say, hey, here's 10 ads we made. Which one of these do you want to run? Which of these are approved? You can just pay for those individual ads and we'll get them live in the ad account. We'll scrap the rest and we'll keep making you as many ads as possible. That is an example of the thing that the subset of folks focused on this sort of activity closest to the ad account that's going to lead to much more impact rather than doing that activity, spending an hour or two making 27 different bid changes in the ad account that you're just going to revert tomorrow anyway. And that's outside of the optimization window. So that's a very specific example of what we have done to focus on a higher impact activity, which is we are going to spend time making ads, and we're just going to keep making ads and get as many ads into the ad account as possible, which is going to have the highest impact on that campaign that has the 2.6 ROAS goal, being able to spend as much volume against it rather than lowering the ROAS target to try to get more spend volume and trading off of efficiency. We're actually adding something net new. And then I think in addition to that, like the one layer above this is the marketing calendar. So ideation related to net new marketing moments, et cetera. Like we could talk about a lot of things there, but the folks that are most involved in this day-to-day workflow, there's so much energy and time that for D2C e-com brands typically goes to this sort of activity in the ad account. And I think there's this expectation that sort of sits in the space more broadly around activity and daily changes and what's going on, where that subset of folks, if we had the workflow that aligned with what we believe is the strongest signal, the campaign targets are aligned with that. And then we're going to spend as much time as possible just creating as many different ads as we can into the ad account to increase that result. I think many brands would see a much stronger outcome from the energy that they're indexing into this workflow.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, it's an interesting sort of like phase, maybe close to a final phase of evolution for the media buyer's role, both at CTC and in general, of kind of like the beginning, like a few years ago, 5 years ago, maybe it was sort of like a day trader, basically,
Yeah.
sort of, buying and selling all day long. But at this point, it just sounds like the best use of almost everybody's time is creative strategy, creative ideation, creative production, because as particularly with recent algorithm changes, as that continues to sort of inevitably progress, the space left over will be just creative. And it sounds like that's kind of like what we're moving towards in terms of what the most useful thing is.
Yes, absolutely. And we've, for those listening or familiar with Compass, the creative AI tool we built out, like we've been investing in tools and technology to allow us to be able to do this as effectively as possible and contribute the amount of output in terms of ad volume necessary. So we've been really focused on equipping our team and our workflow in a way that's able to make this work, where everyone could participate in this process. And I would add, outside of like ad ideation and generation, there's this other bucket related to understanding what is going on deeply in the category and competitor set of each of the brands that are doing this, where another specific example, if you're spending, rather than spending 2 hours each morning adjusting all the budgets and bids on each campaign, surfing the performance, doing the day trading thing, what if the 2 hours was spent looking at your competitor and categorical set, the creative they're running on the platforms, what the shopping feed, what the Google environment looks like related to those folks, getting inspiration from that. There's like this very specific example where we're looking at a brand not long ago where their similar circumstance, their Google brand was performing at like a 8 or 9x, and there was and then the Facebook performance is much lower than that. Call it like somewhere lower than a 2x ROAS. So Facebook is at a 2, Google brand close to a 9x, and there's already sort of this like, well, what do we believe about the Google brand performance, right? Like, it should function that high or not? Well, Google brand incrementality is a lot lower than meta acquisition. We know that as a starting point. But even at 30% incrementality factor, Google brand at a 9x is performing at a 2.7 ROAS for the brand, which is higher than your meta performance over that time period, even after applying the incrementality factor. And then you look into the Google brand shopping feed into the SERP, and you see that the brand is getting outbid by a bunch of retailers and competitors. They have like one or two of the spots in the top 10 related to those folks. So there's a bunch of this brand demand for the business that we're driving all this traffic from Meta and the net new channels, and it's not being captured within the Google brand feed. And Taylor put out a tweet on this recently as well, which is, I think we've all gone, potentially the pendulum has swung a little too hard on the Google brand side of things. With PMax and Google brand specifically, we went pretty hard on like scrutinizing that. And I think we're at a place where we kind of need to swing back more towards the middle, where we're seeing for a lot of brands right now, there's a bunch of opportunity within Google brand shopping, specifically within the shopping feed for your branded terms. And even after applying 30% incrementality factor starting point, it's higher efficiency than a lot of other channels, where just understanding that dynamic and solving for the Google brand shopping feed is going to drive a lot more net contribution for the business than let's keep tweaking the bids and budgets on our meta campaigns. And then that demand is going to be captured on the other side as well. So I think, yeah, those two buckets, like ad ideation, generation, and then deep understanding of the competitor and category set, it's a broader perspective that once you set your ROAS targets where they need to be and align on incrementality as the source of truth, let those be and go solve higher impact problems. The platforms are at a place where it's going to allow you to do that. And it's actually probably going to be better performance if you approach it in that way.
Yeah. So usually I like to end these almost any podcast episode with the question about like, what's the most impactful thing that you listening at home can do right now with your business in order to kind of bring about some of the stuff we're talking about. And partially it sounds like that might be make your media buyers creative strategists also. But so I'd be interested, if you could, if you have another sort of like more important thing for people to apply at home, I'd be interested in that. But I would be first, let's talk a little bit about what does it look like to do that in terms of like, are you all of a sudden having brainstorming sessions every week, or what's the actual like execution been, at least so far, for that sort of transition?
Yeah. For most brands, the most effective workflow for this is going to be allocate the time with your media buyer or whoever's managing the the Meta account, and then have a creative strategist / designer, have two people dedicated to making Meta ads. Like, just have two people who sit next to each other if possible, or if remote, who spend a lot of time of the day just ideating, dreaming up ads and making them together. If you can dedicate two people to start with that workflow and set the expectation of their time in that way, rather than, hey, what are the adjustments for making the ad account? What bid should we, right? Like, it's how many ads did we make today? How many ads can we make? Just start there. Get two people focused on volume of creative output and just getting it in the ad account. For many brands, that is going to be a step in the direction where that's the expectation for those two folks. That is their core expectations. Make as many ads as possible and just get them live in the ad account. Prior to that being able to happen, the other thing that everyone should do immediately is, for all the core decision makers related to the D2C business. So it's going to change based on your org structure, but CEO / founder, and then anyone overseeing the marketing channel, and then all the way down to the folks doing the media buying on a day-to-day basis. Ask everyone what the Meta ROAS target and why it's set that way. And the response is, if there are different responses being given, that's a yellow flag. If there's the same responses being given and it's not related to the result of a geo holdout experiment at any point in time, that's also a yellow flag, because that is, from what we've seen in existence, going to be the strongest signal of the performance of the channels. And so if that is not informing the way that your channel targets are being set currently, that is what needs to happen out of the gate to give you the highest confidence that you have the right signal, and then to set the channel targets in alignment with it and have them be in a place that you're confident in letting them be, and letting them ride against the optimization window, so that the team can then focus on these higher impact activities.
Love it. All right. Well, wise words from the front line. And I will say one other thing too. You'd mentioned, Luke, our incrementality benchmarks, which is to say, like, if you don't have a geo holdout test lined up yet, or whatever the case may be, we do have a sort of a set of benchmarks that you can at least begin from for judging the incrementality, this is the ROAS of any given channel. So check out, it should be on our YouTube channel, my conversation with Luke and I believe Tony around incrementality, that also has a deck slide in it that contains some of those benchmarks. So check that out. But I think we'll wrap it up there. Luke, appreciate the time, appreciate your advice. And for everyone else out there, we will talk to you next time. See ya.